Hi, this is Courtney Dade, CEO of CSD Marketing and Consulting, and we're here for another episode of the Phoenix Project. And the Phoenix Project is really an opportunity for different business leaders and business owners to come together to discuss how we navigate through this new normal. And 2020 has definitely rocked our socks, and 2021 has shown to be quite eventful as well. And so one of the things that I have struggled with personally and have shared on my social media accounts is that I'm not necessarily taking care of myself. And as business owners and leaders, we are responsible for that. So I'm so excited about our guest today. This is Miss Alice Greene, and she is a health coach that has a very unique and special approach to the way that she looks at health and healthy eating and taking care of yourself. So without further ado, I'd love to kick it off to you, Alice. And can you please tell us all about your company and everything that you do? Just like give us the lowdown.
Oh, Courtney, it's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Well, I think where I want to start is that for 15 years, I have been empowering women, most of my clients are women, to make healthier choices in the way that they eat, drink. I have dealt with a lot of people with wanting to drink less and moderate drinking. So the way they eat, they drink, they exercise, that feels so good, is so natural to them, is so aligned to who they are, that they can easily sustain it so they can become their own long-term success story. And I think that's what we all want. We want to be successful long-term. And that really comes out of my own story, because I have now, and I'm really proud of this, for 17 years, as of January 1st, I have been a long-term health, fitness, and weight loss success.
Awesome.
So it is amazing. And I can tell you, I wasn't voted most likely to succeed at this at all. So 17 years ago, I was in my very early 40s, going into perimenopause, but I had spent 20 years as working in corporate America. I had been a workaholic. I had not taken care of myself. I was at that time running a high-tech consultancy firm, killing myself. I had a staff. I was working really long hours. I always had. And at that time, I was struggling with so many different things. I had chronic fatigue. So I'm running this high-tech business with chronic fatigue, had it for 7 years. I had put on about 5 dress sizes the previous year and a half. So the dieting, I had been doing extreme dieting since high school and was really in that low-fat diet period. And the dieting wasn't working anymore, which was like, oh my God.
What now?
Right. I was also nauseous all the time. I was at the chiropractor all the time. I was really a mess. And that's because I had not focused on me. I wasn't eating well. I hated exercise, Courtney. I was like, no, don't want to ever have to do that.
My story. I had to grab a note like, okay, this sounds familiar.
I think it's familiar to a lot of people. And I had a wake-up call. So I had, when I got chronic fatigue, I would get bedridden sometimes for a month or more. And I had one of those bad episodes, and I had a wake-up call, and it was so profound. And I was like, if you don't do something, if you don't make a change, maybe you won't be able to. Like, I got really scared.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about wake-up calls for all of us is that I had been getting them and doing nothing about them.
Yeah.
And that it was yet another wake-up call, another defining moment. And that time I vowed that I was going to, and the most important thing I vowed was I was going to start exercising and not stop, which that was the hardest thing to decide, but it was what I knew. So essentially, January 1st, 17 years ago, I got on my Stairmaster, and the Stairmaster, that was in the basement that I never used. Yeah. That a trainer had convinced me to get years before that. And I could do like 2 minutes. It was so hard. But what I had decided was I didn't want to go to the gym. I didn't want a trainer. I didn't want to do another diet. I didn't want somebody telling me what to do. I had this really strong, I want to do it my way.
Yeah.
And that was the best decision I made. And I intuited my way through it. I got myself a cookbook that taught me how to cook. It wasn't recipes because I didn't know how to cook. I was eating 2 bagels for breakfast was my daily routine, like really unhealthy. But what happened during that year, and I can't say it was all easy, but I started to do little things and building on little successes and making healthier choices and learning for myself. And I was honoring my way of doing this. And I noticed as I went through it that I was actually quite compassionate with myself. I wasn't beating myself up if I wasn't getting it all right. And it was what I learned through this was a very compassionate, very loving, self-honoring process of creating a healthy lifestyle. It didn't happen so fast. I didn't lose the weight right away. In fact, it took quite a while, but I was really patient and really forgiving and not judgmental. And at the end of the year, I had lost quite a bit of weight. I was in a lot better shape. Oh my gosh, my health was so much better. And within the next 2 years, I was in basically fighting weight, really fit for the first time. So what happened is that I got passion.
Yeah.
I became passionate about fitness and healthy eating and taking care of myself and reducing stress. And I then wanted to get the certifications to back that up. So that led me to create this business. And back then, early 2000s or mid 2000s, there weren't people like me. The
Right.
idea of there was just the beginning of fitness coaches. But a fitness coach was a trainer, and I did get certified as a trainer. It was the first thing that I did, but I didn't want to be one. I was kind of trying to figure out how do I teach people how to have a healthy lifestyle the way I was doing it. And then I was looking at all those success stories, you see in the magazines, and you
Yeah.
start seeing how everybody does it differently. There isn't one way. And when I really looked at a lot of, say in January, how People magazine comes out with the success stories, I was seeing that what I was doing is what a lot of people who are successful for the long term do. They weren't following one way. They had found their own little path, their own journey. And so what I've ended up discovering from my journey and from working now with lots and lots of people over these 15 years is what I think is the secret. And it's what we're not taught. And that secret is, instead of striving to be good and fit into somebody's box of how you're supposed to do it, and there's so many people offering those solutions, it's following what feels good. And it's a completely different way of doing it. And you're no longer in that judgment, because when you're striving to be good, what you're doing essentially is handing your power over to somebody else. You're not trusting your judgment. You're assuming somebody knows better than you do. And then what you're trying to do is you're trying to measure up. You're trying to comply. You're trying to be good. And if you don't do it perfectly, you're beating yourself up. You've got that little inner critic going. You're eventually failing. Eventually you give up. You say, I can't do this. I'm not good at this. I'm bad. And that actually generates this horrible cycle where you end up doing more of what you don't want to do.
Oh
You
my gosh. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
end up resisting the exercise. You end up eating more food. And when you turn it around and you focus on doing what feels good, you're empowering yourself. You're developing a trust for yourself, and you're starting to. It's so much easier because you're not fighting you. You're honoring. No, I'm not saying that you don't need a guide, but having somebody who is not in the judgment of you, but actually trying to work with what works best for you. So it's an intuitive approach versus a compliance approach, and it shifts the whole game.
Yeah. So you said so many things that were like, oh my gosh, so many like light bulbs came off. I think one thing that I haven't heard. So when I look at a diet or I'm sorry, like a health and wellness program, feeling good is not any part of the process that I see. People just will tell you like on the other side of skinny, it'll feel great. But the process getting there looks horrible. And so I think I have a lot of resistance to doing things like that, because in a time and place where, especially right now during this pandemic and in California with the shutdowns, it's like there's already so many things that feel difficult for me. So then now taking on this new, like, as you said, compliance, oh, that was brilliant. Like this compliance way of trying to get healthier just feels awful. And like, I don't want to do that. And it's sad because it's like, you know, what you said before is you have all these red flags, and knowing that if I were to, you know, be more fit, or if I could get healthier, it would make things probably easier. But that transition of getting to that space feels like torture. It just doesn't feel fun or seem fun. I see a lot of people on social media that do like a keto diet, or they have some very restrictive type of diet. And then I've seen some of them, you know, go back to their weight if they had like a piece of bread. And I'm just like I like bread. So how do you get, so I'm not going to start at all. And I think that so many things that you said were important. So can you tell me, during your journey, you said that, you know, you took these little steps, which I love, and that with the weight didn't necessarily come off quickly, but it came off and you were kinder to yourself. Can you kind of explain what the shift was and how you kind of developed that patience and grace with yourself during the process?
You know, it's interesting. I do remember having some tough days in that, you know, when I wasn't, and I'll tell you, one of the gifts, yeah, actually one of the greatest gifts is I stopped weighing myself.
Mm.
I actually have not been on a scale in 15 years. I honestly, because that number is so hard on us, it's actually what becomes how we judge ourselves. Oh my God, you know, I wasn't good enough, or, oh, yay, you know, I exercised enough. Now I can go do something. You know, I don't have to exercise tomorrow. Or we create such interesting behavioral choices because of that scale, and striving to hit a number that we think is the number. And I think that really twists us. So I didn't weigh myself. When I was not able to get myself down to the Stairmaster, I was kind to myself about it. Like if I didn't do it, I'd be like, okay, tomorrow. But what ended up happening is that as I was seeing those little pieces that were kind of the struggle, would then come up with a strategy. And that's ended up becoming a big part of the work is okay, that didn't feel good. It didn't feel good not to do what I said I was going to do. What would feel better? And so I remember that there was a particular news show. It was the McNeil-Lehrer News Hour back then, 6 o'clock. And I would say, okay, all I have to do is I just have to get my sneakers on. I just have to get on the Stairmaster. I only have to do whatever minutes I was saying. So it wasn't like arduous. I gave myself a little goal. It's like, all you have to do is. And then what I would do is no discussion. No, you have to go. So I did start doing some things. It was like, no discussion. Too bad, girl. You got to go. But it wasn't so arduous because I wasn't setting a really tough goal. And I was also finding that the more little successes I had, the more motivated I was. Ooh, well, I could do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I think when it came to exercise, which I think is the toughest, you know, for all these years, I've worked with people with a lot of food issues and exercise issues. Exercise is the toughest. I think it's the thing that many of us dislike the most. It's the one that feels hard and work. So if you can make that fun, and I think the thing that I was also doing, and a lot of women that I've worked have done this, we have this idea that exercise fits in this box, and it really is at the gym.
Yeah.
And that's not true. There are so many things. So one of the things I was doing is like dancing, you know, just getting your heart rate up. I think that we have this idea, and the fitness industry and the diet industry has really kind of given us a disservice because they've limited our choices as to what is healthy.
Right.
And so exercise, and a lot of my clients, we don't even use that word. It's like, that's a bad word. You know, what's active, or what would feel good to move. And so I think you're changing your vocabulary is a big part of it. And I think I was doing that year. I was changing my vocabulary. I was giving myself little easy steps that didn't feel so unpleasant. And I was choosing with food, I was getting excited about cooking. And I think this is really important, that we're not just, we're not restricting ourselves so much that we're not getting to enjoy the food that we're eating. And so I started to learn by cooking, you can really do this, what was satisfying. And so you start shifting that, what's healthy and what's satisfying, and not, now, of course, at that time I was dealing with having to restrict certain foods because I discovered that I had a lot of food intolerances.
Okay.
And that was actually affecting, that's what ended up really creating the chronic fatigue. But I was learning how to do substitutions, and I was having a little bit of fun with that. So did that help?
That's perfect. Yeah, no, I love that. So you were talking about intuitive eating. So here's interesting, because of course it's all about me right now. Is one of the things that I have experienced over time, especially during this time, is, and I think a lot of it has to do with just the prolonged stress that everybody is under during this pandemic and whatever goes on in life. And at this point, we've been in it for so long, it almost feels like I'm in a heightened state of stress. Like things can have little moments of sunshine, but there's so much uncertainty that keeps kind of hitting. Is I don't necessarily trust my gut all the time the way I used to. And I know a big part of your program is intuitive eating. And so with that being said, I know as a coach that you work with different women, what are some ways that you help people to get in touch with their intuition again, if they've lost it, or to identify, because you were saying something that was interesting, that people do it all the time, they just don't necessarily know they do it. What are some of the tools or techniques? You don't have to give away everything, but just what are a couple things that you do to kind of flex that intuition and really get in tune with your gut again?
Well, one obvious thing, and it's actually the core of something called intuitive eating. Intuitive eating actually came out in 1995. Two registered dietitians who were in the eating disorder industry had come out with that term. And this really comes from them. I want to give them credit for it. What they brought out to us, and it's really how those who don't struggle with food do it anyway, it's learning to eat when you're hungry and learning what hunger is and stopping before you get full. And what's amazing, and I have seen this so many times, most of us don't know.
Okay.
It's so interesting that we have, because of being under stress, because of dieting has really shut us down. I think everything that we've been taught about eating healthy and exercise and taking care of yourself is really about not listening to ourselves. I think we've gotten so disconnected. So many of my clients do not know when they first start working with me what it even feels like to be full, because they've never paid attention. And so then a part of what, in fact, the very first thing I do the very first week, when I have a consultation with somebody and they want to work with me, before our first session, I say, okay, this next week, all I want you to do before we meet again is start to pay attention when you eat as to what point do you start to feel full. That's all you have to do. The insights that people get from that is mind-blowing. I mean, it can shift somebody in a week. Because what happens is a lot of people start to discover what it feels like and that they don't like it. And that they didn't even realize that they didn't like it. Or some people realize that it's a good feeling to them. It's a comfort feeling to them. But when you start to realize what that point is, you actually, and this is back to feeling good, it doesn't feel good. You start to actually make changes, because you don't want to have that feeling. And now you're conscious of it. So being intuitive is actually about becoming conscious. So when you start paying attention to when you're not eating unless you're hungry. So if you're about to, and we all do it, especially because of the pandemic, we're in the kitchen. We don't even know why, right?
I'm always in the kitchen.
Right? You're going to the cabinet, you're starting to look around, and it's asking the question. Usually what we're asking for is like, I want something, I don't know what I want, right?
Yes.
That's what we're usually, but that's not the right question. To become conscious is, am I hungry?
Yeah.
We're not most of the time. When we're in the kitchen doing that, I want something, I don't know what I want. We're not hungry, we want something, but it isn't food.
Right.
And food isn't going to solve the problem. So it's becoming, and so I actually, in my program, I've sort of developed the 3 C's. And I did that because I had to give a presentation one time, right? So what is this work? And the first C is consciousness without judgment, because it's the judgment that actually really messes up with us. So you can get connected to your gut, but if you're in judgment of the choices that you're making, you're actually immediately disconnecting. You're going back into your head, back into what you think you should do. So it's being conscious, is being conscious of your hunger, being conscious of and eating when you're hungry. Or how many of us don't eat when we're hungry?
Right.
And then we get
Especially if you're
ravenous.
busy. Like if I'm busy, if I'm working, I'm in the zone, then I'll like get all these things. And by the time I get up to do something, I've got the headache. And now it's like, I need everything. Like I'm in pain. I'm like ravenous. I need all the food.
That's exact. It's absolutely, and yes, absolutely. If you get super hungry, now you're going to overeat.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so it's becoming conscious of what's going on. So you're getting conscious of, we've been talking a lot about food, and part of that is also being conscious of what's satisfying. This is really interesting. Many of us, especially if you're doing dieting or in that mode, or I shouldn't eat, you're not eating what's satisfying. And if you don't get satisfied, you're going to continue to eat to try to find the satisfaction.
Yeah.
So one is eating the foods that you love. And so one of the things that makes it so fun for my clients is that when we're sitting there talking about food, I'm like, what is your favorite food? And unless it's toxic to them, I said, we're building your meal around your favorite food. The one thing I want people to be able to do is eat what they enjoy. And when you learn how to balance food instead of good food, bad food, which there really is almost no good food, bad food. I mean, first of all, we can have almost everything in moderation unless it doesn't agree with us.
Right.
But you can take, and that's the idea, is to eat. We're here to enjoy and enjoy our food. And so if you could build your meal in a balanced, healthy way around the food that you enjoy eating, and you get satisfied and you're aware that you're satisfied, you actually don't need or want more. It's a lot easier to stop.
That's awesome.
And around exercise, it's also starting to become conscious of what's motivating to you and what's working and what isn't working. And maybe you're doing an exercise that actually is hurting your body, or you're trying to push through pain and you believe it's got to have pain to have gain.
No pain, no gain. Yeah.
And that's completely untrue. So it's
no gain. I don't want it.
Yeah. So it's becoming conscious, both of what's working, but I think the other thing, and it's really probably one of the other significant parts of it, is becoming conscious of what you're thinking and what you're feeling that's driving your unconscious choices. We're so disconnected. We don't know, like when we're in the kitchen, that what we really need is to address our anger or our frustration or our stress. So it's becoming connected and starting to recognize, what are those triggers? What's the subconscious autopilot that we're on? And once you start to look at them, and if you're not in judgment, it's a lot easier to look at them and realize, and I believe this is really true, there's no bad reason. You're not bad when you do these things. Everything we do is for a good reason, but it might not be a reason that fits us anymore. One time it really worked. There was a good reason that we are doing what we do. So in a loving, compassionate way, let's look at it. Let's dig to the real cause, and then have strategies that support us. And then guess what? You feel good about yourself. Another win.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, okay, perfect. This was so much information and it's really great. Like I'm personally just feeling really inspired to kind of, do some of just the tools and techniques that you provided. So if you could give like one piece of advice or something that to support like people that are business owners or in, just high stress times right now, because that's what we're all experiencing. What's one way that you would recommend based on your expertise of something that someone could take action on immediately to find greater balance or to feel good in their eating? Just one simple one simple action that people could take based on what you kind of talked about.
Well, I think honestly, one of the most important things is when you're reaching for food to really check in and see if you're hungry. Because I think uh, what's adding to the stress is all the overeating. You
Yeah.
know, we don't feel good about that, and it doesn't actually make us feel better. So I think it adds, our bodies get stressed when we do that, or when we don't eat. So it seems such a small thing, but it's actually really an important thing. And once you start connecting to that, then you're now conscious to do it. And then you can really ask, what is it that I really need and want? And I think because we are all so stressed, one of the next steps is really breathing. It's connecting to our hearts. It's taking that moment when we think we want food, which is not really what we want, and maybe taking that time and it's such a beautiful thing. You know, we say, go for the breath, but we don't remember to breathe. But if you tie it to the food, and it's such an interesting thing, when you start to become conscious around food, it actually gives you a place to pause.
Mm. Yeah.
So so if you're
in the kitchen trip.
That's right. But if you get there and you realize that you're not hungry, and what you really are is you really are stressed, you wouldn't have thought of it, because
Right.
we get so caught up. That becomes a time when you can, breathe. And it's so simple, really, but when you breathe in and you breathe out with a longer out breath, that's when you calm your body. That's when you de-stress, because you're shifting from the sympathetic, the high stress mode, into the parasympathetic mode. And when you get into that calmer place, you can make better decisions just in general.
Awesome. That's great. That's great, and something that someone can start today.
Yep. Yeah.
so
Well,
so
I
this
think,
is
and also just checking in when you're eating, whenever you're eating, what does that feel like? When are you getting full? At what point are you starting to actually get satisfied, or starting to shift into fullness? And how does that feel?
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so you've given so much great information today. So what would be the best way for our audience to connect with you and, maybe get a consultation or opportunity to work with you?
Well, that's actually the easiest way, is to reach me on my website. I have a link where you can set up an appointment, or you can reach me through my email. And I think you've got it, info. It's easier than doing my name. So and my company is called Feel Your Personal Best, because that's what this is all about.
All about.
So info at Feel Your Personal Best, and you can get what I call a clarity empowerment session. It's a free consultation that'll help you get clear on what it is that you're trying to do, and what direction you want to take with this.
Awesome. Well, I thank you. I feel like right now the work that you're doing is probably more important than it's ever been. I remember when we first started talking, you were talking about women looking to drink less. I know that a lot of my friends, especially when it first started, were reaching for bottles of wine. And then when there's so many activities that have been removed from you, then, just like indulging in food kind of seems like the safest option, in the sense of you're not outside being exposed to COVID, but then now you have these other long-term challenges that you're kind of setting yourself up with. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I hope that more people are able to connect with you and really learn how to take control in a really kind, I think that's the thing that resonated the most with me, in a really kind and gentle way, so that it's lasting and it's not regimented. And I mean, it's still guided, but not necessarily, you can't have this, you have to eat at this time. Like, that's that stuff that just exhausts me. And I see people have results, but I'm like, could I keep that up forever? And so I think that your approach is, well, obviously 17 years is a forever solution. And I think that's amazing. So thank you so much for your time with us today. And for everybody, I'll have links everywhere that this video is, so you can connect with Alice and book your consultation to get clarity about what you want. And until then, I'll see you guys all next for our next episode. And thank you so much, Alice, for coming. I appreciate you.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Courtney. This was fun. I had a wonderful time. It's fun to be part of your Phoenix project.
Yay, thank you so much. Have a good one.
You
Thanks.
too. Bye.